Yes, and it's this idea that it's a skill that you can learn. So if you can think of something else that was hard and you figured it out and you learned how to do it, just know that money is and money management is the same thing. And one of the dynamics that you're describing is where one partner manages all of the finances. So I think when you're on your own, you're forced to some degree to manage your money. Whether you're really good at it or it's not really a skill that you've acquired, you're still managing your own money and you are the sole person who's responsible for your finances. And I think especially if you don't enjoy it, it's very easy to relinquish that control to a partner if that partner is interested in being the money manager. I had a client who at her first job just was told like the male employees handled the money, and he just, explicitly said girls aren't good at math. So he assigned that task to the male. I've had a client who, the dynamic in the relationship was, the other partner was a little more comfortable carrying debt. And they were like, I don't want to just carry on this pattern because it's what I've been doing. I want to learn a new way. And I think, especially when you are finding yourself in this new financial situation, it's kind of the first step is this building a budget, building a realistic budget. And what does that look like with, what you've got coming in and what you've got going out? I don't want to be on a budget. I want to be able to spend freely on whatever I want because I'm a spontaneous person. And so we'll budget for spontaneity. I'll say, okay, so create an account and start putting money in there. And if something comes up that, is an exciting opportunity that you don't want to miss out on, FOMO, now you at least have the money there to do it.
Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Omand, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. Hi, welcome to the Just Separate podcast. I'm your host, Karen Omand, co-founder of Divorce Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about money confidence after divorce, and our guest expert is Sarah Gage. Sarah is the founder of Wealth Confidence Coaching, where she empowers single women to take control of their financial futures with clarity, confidence. Sarah combines practical strategies with transformational coaching to help her clients achieve their financial goals. She is passionate about demystifying money and guiding women towards financial independence. Through her work, Sarah inspires growth, resilience, and confidence, and a confident relationship with money. Welcome, Sarah, to the Just Separated podcast.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me.
One of the things I've noticed in many conversations is that it's not always that women lose confidence with money and divorce. For a lot of women, their confidence was already there, or they were building before they got married. But something happens or shift happens once we're in the marriage. Often the husband ends up taking over the financial side. And by the time the divorce happens, there's a big gap in knowledge and practice, but also in confidence is what we're talking about today. So I want to ask you, why is that such a common story?
I think when you look at money relationships when it comes to couples, there are a few dynamics that you can see. And one of the dynamics that you're describing is where one partner manages all of the finances. So I think when you're on your own, you're forced to some degree to manage your money. Whether you're, really good at it or it's not really a skill that you've acquired, you're still managing your own money and you are the sole person who's responsible for your finances. And I think especially if you don't enjoy it, it's very easy to relinquish that control to a partner if that partner is interested in being the money manager. And managing your money is a skill like any other. So I think what you're kind of describing is this: if you don't use it, you lose it. And building confidence comes from doing the thing. And it might involve trying and failing, But as you try and fail and learn, you get better at it. And then that's how you build your confidence. So if you are coming out of a marriage where the other person has been doing the finances for however many years you've been married, you are just kind of out of touch with looking at the bank account on a regular basis, knowing your numbers. Maybe you have no idea how much money you were bringing in as a couple or what your expenses were. And it can really feel overwhelming if you don't have that awareness and you don't have that knowledge. And so I think a lot of times when people are thinking about getting started, it's such an overwhelming idea to have to learn all of that or to maybe have to relearn it.
And think about all the other facets that come with divorce, right? We talk about co-parenting if you have children. We talk about the legal. We talk about emotional, right? And so all of a sudden, you have this major gap in confidence.
Mhm.
And for many women, it's scary. Like it's overwhelming, but it's also a bit scary to face that, right? And one of the things I wanted to mention too is when you said lack of interest, that seems to be also that comes up too.
Mhm. One person really takes an interest in it and kind of takes over. And there's the lack of interest seems to be kind of tied in with maybe some idea that we're not good at money. So if you've ever heard that or learned that externally, and I've had clients who just kind of grew up with this mantra, I'm not good with money. If you don't feel like you're good at something, you're probably not going to take a very active interest in it. And so I think that a lot of people can shy away from it. And then if they have an opportunity to not have to deal with it, then they're, kind of want to wash their hands of it and be hands off with it. And then you fall into that trap of now the longer you go without dealing with it, the more overwhelming it becomes. And it does become this scary thing where it's really hard to kind of take that first step.
Yeah, so I was thinking about my own experience, right? Like subtly or indirectly, I was kind of told, whether it was
Yes.
subconscious or what, like
Yes.
that, I know the grocery bills, right? And I'll know the cable costs and stuff, but all the other stuff, it's like, I don't think it was, I don't know if it was for some people, not more high conflict, right? It could be directly financial abuse or financial control,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you've had clients like that. And then others, it was just that big gap, but it's also societal. So I'm glad you touched down on that, because it's really important that people understand that it's kind of subtle in how it's done, right?
It can be very subtle. And this goes to what are called money scripts, which are our core beliefs about money. And some of these beliefs are about ourselves and money and our abilities with money and our skills with money. And that's one where I see clients, like you say, maybe a little more subtly, like they can see how maybe their parents' relationship was with each other with money, and they observe some of these dynamics, or they might be told straight out. I had a client who, at her first job, just was told, like, the male employees handled the money, and he just, explicitly said, girls aren't good at math. So he assigned that task to the male. So that was much more explicit, like just flat out being told. And, kind of obviously a gender bias. And we do internalize those things, especially when we're young and we don't know any better. It can be internalized to such a degree that it's really hard to even recognize where it came from when we get older and we struggle with money.
Yeah, because I've heard of stories where these women are sitting on quite a bit of money, but the story is so ingrained that they actually think they're going to be a bag lady.
Yes, yes, yes. And you also mentioned, going through divorce and emotions, and money can be very emotional. And, this idea that there will never be enough. So money as security. And, what is enough? And how do I know that I'm, going to have enough to get me through the rest of my life? struggling to put a number to that when really it's not a numbers thing, it's a feelings thing and an emotional thing.
Yeah, because I think if you looked at her finances, you'd be okay. There's not really any possibility that you're going to be on the street. But that saying, that feeling that you're describing is what she feels anyways. So, do you think that for many women, because they haven't practiced it, like it's like a muscle, like you said, is they're not used to making a lot of those decisions?
Yes, yes. Decision making, especially when there's, big dollars involved, can also be even, small decisions. Like we've all heard of decision fatigue. Again, it comes back to this idea that maybe it's overwhelming to think about being the sole person now in charge of all of these finances and all of these decisions. And, when it comes to saving, investing, paying off debt, even just, which streaming services should we have and pay for. It's a lot of decisions. And again, whenever overwhelm comes up, that's usually when the kind of fight, flight, freeze sets in and we freeze and don't take any action.
And then they'll go to the extreme, right? Where they won't look at their paperwork, but they'll
Yes.
either I also have heard that sometimes they overspend. Like I've also heard that where they'll just spend, 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 and then I've seen it the other way where they cut off everything and that's too severe. So I don't know if you've seen those as well.
Yeah, a lot of the overspending in the sense that spending is or shopping can be that thing that brings them relief. And so when they're experiencing uncomfortable emotions, then the default is to go buy something and feel that immediate relief. And I was just having this conversation with a client where it's like there's a kind of invisible veil that goes up between the pleasure that buying things brings and that immediate pleasure and that immediate relief and the instant gratification. And then, especially if someone is struggling with debt and it's all going on credit cards, that becomes a separate issue. Like there's no connection kind of mentally between this behavior is actually causing this problem that is causing me stress. So they kind of disconnect the spending, which is a feel good thing, with the debt, which is a feel bad thing and a stressful thing. And so the almost you have to see that connection and be able to foresee, okay, this thing is going to make me feel good in the moment, but it's going to end up on my credit card. And if I don't have a plan to pay that off, it's going to lead to more stress in the end. And so I'm trying to relieve stress with this shopping behavior, but it's really generating more stress on the other side. And I think making that connection can be transformative for people, and help them to want to avoid the spending, but definitely spending as an emotional release and as a stress release can lead to that cycle of, I don't know what's going on with my money. I know I've got all this debt I need to deal with. I'm really stressed out. I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to buy something. I will feel better when I hit, purchase, if it's online shopping or if I go to the mall and I, get some new clothes, some of these positive feelings that come along with that. And then it's like I'll deal with the credit card later. Then they become kind of two separate things in someone's mind.
Yeah, that's actually I totally agree with you because in the grief world too, right? Like I've seen it with widows and I've actually seen it with widows and widowers where I've seen a widower buy a car that he didn't need, that he probably couldn't afford, but it made him feel better for, the day. And women too, like widows as well, but also divorced women as well, right? So I love that you brought that up. I wanted to mention too that there's also for the change in lifestyle,
Yes.
and that happens to, except if you're Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, most divorced people, there's a change in lifestyle. And I think that's can be something that a lot of people have to wrap their head around.
Right. So definitely if you go from two incomes to one income, even if you're getting, spousal support, child support, it might not be, well, especially your expenses are now going to be proportionately larger. If you have to pay rent or pay a mortgage by yourself versus being able to split that cost with another person. So kind of automatically, you're right. It does shift probably your income and your expenses, which should shift your lifestyle. And I love this quote from Byron Katie. So, kind of accepting that you do need to change your lifestyle versus kind of resisting and trying to continue to live your old lifestyle within your new means. Byron Katie says, if you argue with reality, you'll lose, but only 100% of the time. So this idea that, resist, resist, resist. I don't like what's happening, so I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to pretend it's not real. Versus just kind of saying, okay, this is how it is now, and what can I do to kind of, live my best life with my new current situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just wrote a blog that I'm going to be putting out not too long about money and grief in
Mm,
divorce, because it's not talked about enough, right? Like that there is a grief component, and that
mm.
as I love that quote, because the more you resist, the harder it's going to be, except it does take time, right? It's not like within a week you're like, okay, I was living really high and now I'm half of that. I mean, it does take time to process and but there is that reality. And the more that you can, so let's talk a bit about budget. Is that one of the tools that would be used to help be helpful, or
Yeah,
not?
definitely. And I think, especially when you are finding yourself in this new financial situation, it's kind of the first step is this building a budget, building a realistic budget. And what does that look like with, what you've got coming in and what you've got going out? And when you're getting different sources of income, like if you do get spousal support or you have kids and you get the child support, it can look a little different than just your typical, biweekly paycheck. So now maybe you're getting your biweekly paycheck and you're also getting like a monthly amount from your spouse. And so taking a look at what does that look like and having a clear picture of these are my sources of income and these are my expenses, and kind of looking at what's going out in the form of, bills, rent, mortgage, groceries, and things like that. So I always start with getting those numbers on paper.
Would that decrease anxiety?
It often does. That's a very good point. So people who have been avoiding looking at their numbers, usually when they see it all on paper, do experience kind of a sense of relief from just having the knowledge and having the awareness of what's coming and what's going out. I have worked with clients where we kind of plan ahead and put all these numbers in a spreadsheet. And I will say, like, look at all these numbers. You were trying to keep those in your head. So if you're trying to do that mental math and have all these, general amounts swirling around in your head, and you're like, oh, I kind of know we have this bill, and we've got, I can kind of list off all the streaming services that we pay for. Um, just having all of that, general information in your head is a lot to try and keep track of mentally. So 100%, oftentimes, as soon as people see everything written down, itemized, all the amounts, there is kind of a sense of relief from just having, we think that we're, avoiding stress by avoiding looking at the numbers, but it's always running in the background. You're always kind of trying to run this mental tally in the background. Can I afford this thing? Should I be paying for this thing? And you don't really know. So it creates a lot of stress that you're not even aware of where it's coming from. And then when you actually see the numbers, it's like, okay, it kind of gives you a sense of control as well, because you can say, okay, oh, we've got, 7 streaming services and we don't use 4 of them. I can cut these. So you can start to see where you have some control over your own spending and what you feel like is an appropriate amount to spend on any given category.
And that'll also decrease the feeling of overwhelmness.
It does. It does. So same idea. Like you can be overwhelmed by the numbers, but when you just see it on a spreadsheet, it's very crisp and clear, and it's not so big. Like you just have kind of, one column with your bills and one column with your amounts, and it's much more simple than, like I say, that mental math or that mental kind trying to keep track of everything. It does look a lot less overwhelming on paper than it feels when you're trying to keep track of it in your head.
So, what are the other things that you see with clients when they're struggling with confidence?
The money scripts are a big one. This idea that I'm not good with money is a very common belief that people, and a lot of women that I work with, just think is the truth. So they don't realize it's just a thought that they're having. They don't necessarily realize that learning how to manage your money is a skill. It feels innate, like either I'm good at it or I'm not. And I was just one of those people who was born, like I can't play in the NBA because I'm not, 6'7" and I don't have these money skills. I just wasn't born with them. So that can create a real lack of confidence. And then, when they don't believe they're good at it, then they won't really try. And then you start to see evidence to support the belief that you're not good at it. So as you struggle and as you overspend or spend emotionally or, avoid looking at your numbers, you start to, see the result of, oh, and now I'm in this much debt. And it's because I'm not good at money. And then the debt supports the belief that you're not good at it. And so it starts to become like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or kind of this idea that, oh yeah, I was right. I knew I wasn't good at money, and now my financial situation supports this idea that I'm not good with money. And then your confidence goes lower and lower.
So, is that probably the main thing that you work with then?
Um, yes, and teaching the skills. And so seeing that shift, almost like a shift in identity from someone who's not good at money to, oh, once I learn the tools and the skills and gain the awareness around where I might be, tripped up with money, or where I might be, triggered to spend money. If I know that and I can have something in place, a system in place, I can be prepared for that so that when it happens, I don't default to spending. Um, then they start to, develop these skills, develop these habits, develop this awareness, and then start to achieve those goals, start to pay down the debt, and start to see a new pattern emerge. So it's like, oh, it turns out I can do this. And then the further down that path they go, the more and more confidence builds, and the more it shifts, the identity shifts from I'm not good at money to, oh, turns out I can do this and I am good with money. And that's kind of the ultimate goal, is to then become this person who is good at money. And you make decisions and choices that then start to support that belief, and then it goes the other way. It becomes like building and building and building on this confidence.
So, one of the things, like I was thinking when you were saying that, is that like more like, do a lot of them, you can tell me, like, is a lot, is it micros, like little baby steps, or is it bigger steps, or is it unique to everybody and how they rebuild that confidence?
That's a good question. I do a lot of, like, with my clients, I do a lot of exercises. So we will look at, like, what are your values and how does your spending align with your values? And so they can have kind of these eye-opening moments of, oh, I didn't realize that this is what's important to me and this is what I say is important to me, but I'm spending all this money on these other things that aren't bringing any real true meaning or fulfillment to my life. And so it's lining up those dots. So there can be kind of some realizations through that, but at the same time, I've worked with clients where we've done that exercise more than once, and the second time we do it, it looks very different. So what they thought even were their values, when we first started versus kind of at the end of the program and, re-examining those values, they've seen the way they feel about money, and sometimes there's a little bit of resistance to change. So very common for clients when we first do the values exercise to value spontaneity. So that's kind of this idea that I don't want to have to restrict myself. I don't want to be on a budget. I want to be able to spend freely on whatever I want because I'm a spontaneous person. And so we'll budget for spontaneity. I'll say, okay, so create an account and start putting money in there. And if something comes up that, is an exciting opportunity that you don't want to miss out on, FOMO, now you at least have the money there to do it. So you can plan for spontaneity. And then down the road, when we look at it again, the spontaneity doesn't really factor in. It's no longer something that's really important to them. And they can kind of see, oh, that was just kind of me pushing back against, I'm about to make these changes. I'm about to start, paying attention to my finances. But part of me really wants to just keep spending the way I've been spending impulsively and having that feeling of freedom. And then they start to see how really having money set aside for all these different goals, all these different, things that they want to have in their life is truly freedom. They come in kind of feeling like freedom is no restrictions, spend how I want on what I want. But I have, usually there's debt, and that debt really is like an anchor that holds you down. So it's the opposite. It's the opposite of freedom. And then they start to, change their habits, set up systems, start to save. And then when they want to buy something, they have the money for it. And people often will naturally buy less when they start to set these intentions and gain this awareness. Suddenly all the things that were, bright and shiny and I had to have it become, that's less important to me than this goal that I set for myself. And so they start to see, the light at the end of the tunnel with the debt. And it's like, when that's all this money that I've been putting towards debt payments will be mine. And then, then what can I do? Then you can start looking at setting other goals. So I really think, to your original question, there are some kind of grand insights, and then it kind of gets implemented in baby steps. And then it's a matter of reflecting back and seeing how your behaviors have changed over time to kind of see the cumulative effect of all of these steps that you've taken and all this awareness that you've gained, and seeing how you start to make decisions differently and, getting yourself in a better financial position. And we always talk about progress over perfection. So not so that you do everything exactly right. And like, I still don't do everything exactly right. Like, I can see where I make mistakes with my money or waste money and I go, oops, like, wouldn't have bought that again. So it's a lifelong process, really, of just trying to generally, make progress in the right direction, and then you can achieve your goals.
And then changing those pathways, right? Because what we talked about today too is about those long pathways. Is I'm not good with money, or what you mentioned about the boss saying you're just not good with money. It's women.
Yeah.
To changing those pathways. And also I just want to mention that it's progress, right? Because you do need self-compassion
Yes.
to say, oh, like, we've all bought outfits that we should have never bought.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We all have something in our closet where what we were thinking. And instead of beating ourselves up about it, just become more aware and maybe more cautious about it. So this has been a great informative conversation. Do you have anything else that you want to add or any tips to give before I ask our last question?
Just on that note of having self-compassion, that will be the thing that prevents you from basically giving up and reverting back to old habits. If you have a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of compassion for yourself, and you can mess up and not beat yourself up and hold it against yourself, like it's the, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I made a mistake and I'm just gonna, this isn't for me, I give up. versus, oh, I made a mistake. I knew that was going to happen. Like I knew this was going to be part of it. It didn't derail me. That's the other thing. When clients can see that making those small mistakes don't fully derail them from making progress towards their goals, then it's easier to accept and keep moving in the right direction. So I just wanted to emphasize that the self-compassion is really key to continuing to make forward progress when we do make mistakes.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's something that, especially when you're going through divorce, and you
Mhm.
have so many things coming at you, that sometimes it's hard to always be perfect or to, so just, as you said, it's a work in progress.
Mhm.
I did want to ask you though, before we go, is society changing with women or is it still the same?
There does seem to be a pattern of, women earning more and women being the one in the relationship that manages the finances. And I've talked to other financial professionals who have said the same thing. So I think this idea that, women are, I mean, it's not a new idea that women are equal to men. So I don't know if it's even always a gendered thing because there are men also out there who I think don't feel like they're good with money. I don't know if there's quite the same level of shame around it. But I have spoken with other kind of female financial professionals who said that there is a shift where it's not uncommon for women to be the higher earner in a relationship and to be the one who manages the money in a relationship. So that will be interesting to see going forward what that looks like.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that because I have two daughters and I just think, I'd like them to listen to or go to you or to somebody that just so if they've because I have a feeling that I may have passed my lack of confidence on to them,
Mm,
right?
mhm, mhm,
Because that happens, right? You're
mhm.
in a family structure, so I just want to I just want to tell everybody that there are people like you, and society is slowly trying to change. Well, women are changing that too, right?
Yes, and it's this idea that it's a skill that you can learn. So
Hmm.
if you can think of something else that was hard and you figured it out and you learned how to do it, just know that money is and money management is the same thing.
Perfect. So the last question I ask everyone on the podcast is for someone who is just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
Um, I like to think of change and sometimes unwanted change as trying to look at it as an opportunity. So, it's really easy to go negative and to feel sorry for ourselves. And there is an element of that that's totally valid. And, take the time to, like you said, there's grief involved in like the end of a relationship. But looking at it as this kind of opportunity, it's kind of a clean slate in a way. And I've had clients come to me after a divorce where they've received a settlement, and it really is a true like financial clean slate where maybe they had some debt and they were able to pay it off. And so taking it as an opportunity, especially when it comes to your money and your relationship with money, like you talked about, like those dynamics that were happening in the relationship, that naturally maybe you let go of the reins a little bit and left it to your husband. Now you can take the time to consider what your relationship with money has looked like and what you would like it to look like going forward, and taking some time to be intentional about, maybe in the past I didn't have that confidence, but maybe that is something I want to learn. Or maybe I was, hands off, but let me take this opportunity to learn this skill and be a little bit more hands on. So just looking at it as less of a negative thing in your life and more of an opportunity, whether it be to learn, whether it be to change past behaviors that were not serving you. I've had a client who, the dynamic in the relationship was, the other partner was a little more comfortable carrying debt. And they were like, I don't want to just carry on this pattern because it's what I've been doing. I want to learn a new way. So yeah, I think that's the main thing is to kind of treat it like a clean slate and look at it as an opportunity to learn something new and learn new behaviors and skills.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It reminds me of even try to be curious about it.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. How can this look different now
Yeah.
that, this change is taking place?
Mm-hmm. So how do they get in touch with you if they would like some coaching and some help?
The best way would be to email me. So my email address is sarah@wealthconfidencecoaching.com. So if anyone has any questions or, they're interested in learning a little bit more about what coaching looks like, shoot me an email. But I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I would get a message through either of those, both at Wealth Confidence Coaching.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes too. But I
Perfect.
think the work that you're doing is extremely important because I don't know a lot of women that don't have some of these pathways,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I kind of want to ask you if it's changing, because it seems to still be a pattern that I'm seeing in clients and in society. So what you're doing needs to get out there more, and we need to stop making that gap that we talked about at the beginning and making it smaller or non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
use your, as you said, as we said, the whole theme of this is to practice it, right? Like use it as a muscle. So I think what you're doing is wonderful. And thank you for coming on the Just Separated podcast.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery, a must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.